Welcome, everyone. It is episode 5 of the Endurance Eats series. If you are an endurance athlete, runner, triathlete, cyclist, this video series is for you, as my dietitian team and I are taking on your nutrition and fueling questions and discussing them in depth. So I'm Alex of Alex Larson Nutrition, and I have with me my team members, Hannah Cooley and Mary Wirtz. We work one-on-one with endurance athletes from around the world, in addition to being athletes ourselves. And if you're new to this video series, please make sure to tap that subscribe button, get alerts for future episodes as they are released. If you have your own endurance nutrition questions, we'd love to hear from you. We can discuss them in future episodes. So head to the comments and ask, or you can reach out to me personally. I will add that to our queue. Now, today's episode is going to be a very specific theme. We are going to be talking about prenatal and postnatal nutrition for our new mom athletes. And it's a little bit of a timely reason of why we're discussing this because, I'm actually, I don't know what I'm at, 28 weeks pregnant with our third and final child. So just kind of made sense for us to discuss this because it's just always at the forefront of my mind. But we recently did have 2 blog posts published on both of these topics. They are very in-depth, and we want to discuss these topics further on this video. So I will provide reference links below in the show notes in the description of the video for both blog articles. So you can definitely check those out, especially because the postpartum one does have my lactation cookie recipe on there, which I have made for over a dozen of my new mom friends, and absolutely 100% of them reach back out to me asking for the recipe because it is so good. And I cannot wait to have this baby so I can eat them during those late night feedings because they are the best. Now, Hannah is actually going to moderate today's discussion. She's going to be interviewing Mary and I. Mary has 2 young girls. As I have said, we have baby number 3 coming. I have 2 young boys. So I'm going to pass this on to Hannah to be our moderator role. So on to you, Hannah.
I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's dive in to the first one. Okay, so tell me, both of you, what are some of the most important nutrition considerations women should consider when pregnant while also remaining active? Mary, do you want to take it off?
Yes, I love this question. And historically, we've known there's just not a lot of specific published guidelines for female endurance athletes that are pregnant. So when we were writing our blog post, what we did is we kind of meshed specific nutrition considerations for endurance athletes with nutrition recommendations for pregnant women to create more tailored guidelines. So first and foremost, it's important to recognize you're growing a fetus. You need additional calories, not so much during the first trimester, but it's going to be imperative during the second and third trimester. For most women, it's going to be anywhere along the range of 350 to 450 extra calories per day. And typically we advise spreading that out throughout the day to make sure that you're getting in enough eating occurrences and enough good, consistent nutrition. So for most pregnant women, that's going to be typically 3 more balanced meals and 2 to 3 snacks, perhaps a bonus snack throughout the day. You know, and I was kind of say asterisks, like ish, right? Because each female is truly very different. Each pregnancy is very, very different. And so some women, depending on your training volume throughout pregnancy, you may honestly need 4 snacks, including a bonus snack throughout the day to support the demands from training and also to support the demands for growing a baby, which is a really good thing. Protein intake can be hard. So, you know, I feel like sometimes we're kind of beating a dead horse with saying athletes need more protein, but they truly do need more protein. And you also have increased pregnancy needs during pregnancy. So typically we're going to recommend closer to 2.0 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, which is really difficult to get in unless
that is a lot.
It is a lot. And Alex, we know that you know this is a lot because you're kind of living right through this, but it's even more challenging unless if with most eating occurrences, you're getting in a good good solid protein source. In our blog, we kind of run through, the Greek yogurt, the cottage cheese. If you're doing a deli meat, make sure it's heated thoroughly, lean meats, eggs, egg whites, doing a third-party tested protein powder without any weird added sugars or added ingredients. So, the challenge that many athletes face with increasing protein is particularly during that first trimester.
Yeah, I've been using Thorne's chocolate whey protein isolate powder in the mornings, just because I'm trying to get my kids out the door. I need to get a good start. And I also will put my multivitamin, I'll open the capsule up because I hate taking pills. And I'll put my multivitamins and my magnesium in there. And so the Thorne, I say this to a lot of people, and I swear by this. When I mix it with some milk and some ice and blend it up, it tastes like a Wendy's Frosty.
Oh my gosh, that has
it's so good. So I'll include a link to my Thorne page here on in the notes, because it truly is. It's so delicious. The vanilla is very good, but there's something about the chocolate one. It is hands down one of the best tasting protein powders that I've had. So it's a really nice way for me to start out my morning with getting that. And then I'll usually do my iron supplement later in the day because I don't want that calcium interfering with that iron absorption as well. So that's something too, is timing out your supplements, because you do typically have additional supplemental recommendations from your doctor. So just making sure that you're optimizing that, I think, is really important. With being pregnant, your blood volume is going to be a lot higher. So hydration is going to be very important. And it's really good practice to do that now, because postpartum, which we'll talk about in a little bit, hydration is very, very key for lactating. So it's just a really good habit to get into and staying hydrated, especially if you're pregnant during the summer like I am. But I don't know, the heat, I've been staying in our air conditioning more than I'd like to, usually for a summer, but yeah. And then let's talk about the struggles of eating while pregnant, because I feel like I experience all of them. Starting with the first trimester, is a lot of women do have morning sickness or all day sickness, as we typically experience. And that range of morning sickness can be varied. I've actually never thrown up during the first trimester. I've just been extremely nauseous. And the thing that I've noticed is when you eat something, that nausea actually will kind of go away, but you're not really hungry to eat anything. So you kind of have to force yourself to take in something. So sometimes that liquid nutrition, like chocolate milk or Fairlife chocolate milk, is always my favorite, because it would curb that nausea. So if I had a important work call where I needed to be on my game, I'd have a glass of chocolate milk beforehand to get me through that call without feeling like death. You're going to be a lot more tired, so you might be napping a little bit more. So just be kind of prepared for that first trimester, fatigue, limited appetite, nausea. If it gets really bad, definitely consult with your OB, because there's things that they can help you with. And I think it's also, is it B6 that they say, one of the B vitamins can help with nausea as well. I didn't take any of that just because my nausea wasn't that terrible. I mean, it was tolerable, but that was something as well.
And most of the prenatal supplements are going to contain that too.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say historically, working with a lot of females, the first trimester can just be very restrictive. And those aversions can be extremely strong. And that is normal. That is normal. It's interesting because there's this dichotomy. You are growing a new baby and you want to make sure that you're optimizing nutrition and you're supporting a tiny little human's needs. It's more than yourself at that point, which can be very motivating, but it can also be very triggering for some women if you're just tied to a box of crackers and a loaf of bread most of the day because you're just trying to kind of scramble your way through the first trimester. But
yeah, saltine crackers and Pedialyte is what I did a lot.
Yes. And, as long as it's not overwhelmingly restrictive, where day in and day out, you're cutting out multiple food groups and you're still getting in some balance in there. The biggest thing too is just going to be making sure that you're consistently taking a high quality prenatal multivitamin day in and day out through the first trimester.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the baby's so small, there really isn't that. It's not as big of a concern as once you get into the later weeks where the baby's gaining like a half a pound a week. I mean, that's pretty significant. So then the other thing too that can happen in like second and third trimester is heartburn, acid reflux. I have it terrible. I do take omeprazole and like approved by my doctor because I don't think I would have more than one child if I didn't have that omeprazole, because it truly, like, the heartburn is so awful. So that's something to that's just really fun about pregnancy. Round ligament pain can be a big issue for women, and which might like hold you back from being more active later on in the pregnancy. Mary, you ran up through your like entire pregnancy, which for me, all three of my kids now, I pretty much don't do much running at all. I take a break. And I'm definitely ready, postpartum to get back to being active, but during pregnancy, it's just not, my body just doesn't care for running and physical activity. So, but yeah, you ran quite a bit when you were pregnant with your girls.
I did. Yeah, I was very lucky. And again, it's that asterisk. Each pregnancy is very, very different. I was very lucky, low risk, healthy pregnancy, no issues. And I also felt good. The second trimester, I felt like it was kind of those glory weeks where things, I don't want to say they feel normal, but you're kind of out of the weeds with the food aversions, the morning sickness, all day sickness. And truly for me, running and exercising throughout the first trimester was one of the few things that helped reduce those food aversions and morning sickness. So that helped motivated me. And I just kept going with it. I was fortunate enough to run until so the day I went into labor, I was debating going to the gym and hopping on the treadmill or going and getting checked out because I think my water had broken. My coworkers talked me into going and getting checked out. And sure enough,
good to be smart and listen to your coworkers.
Yes, but I truly echo the third trimester. Some of those symptoms, the early satiety, the reflux, the increased Braxton Hicks too, which can be a little bit overwhelming for some women. And typically we do find that those are increased if you're even a little dehydrated. So making sure that you're increasing fluid volume throughout the day would be one of the main recommendations for them.
I think the thing that, like, everything that I've read, I've had so many of my friends that have been pregnant, like all of my sisters have. I think the thing that I've come to realize that there truly is no normal, that everybody's experience is so different and so unique. So as much as I think it's really good to hear about other people's experiences, I think talking to a lot of people seems like it's a good thing to do, just so it's almost like you kind of like almost like normalize that there's just a lot of different experiences. And then on top of that too, like already being an athlete, it seems like there's an extra level of body awareness, which can help, it seems, with managing symptoms, managing like the uncomfortableness that pregnancy can bring. It's almost like you guys have had all of this practice in all of your athletic endeavors just to kind of roll with the punches, realize this is temporary, and that the end result is going to be something really amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's important to be really open-minded going into pregnancy with just your expectations of your activity level, your nutrition, just because you honestly can't predict it. I mean, I had a good friend when I was living in Winona who did the sprint triathlon there in town at 37 weeks pregnant. And then the next weekend she went over to Rochester and did the sprint triathlon at, like another week pregnant. I was just like, That's incredible. Where like for me, I literally feel like my uterus would be like falling out of me if I tried to do that. So you have to go into it open-minded and just not expecting yourself to be one of those like super pregnant people, because those are pretty rare, to be honest. And you don't have to be that. You know what I mean? Like no one's going to give you a gold star for doing a triathlon at 37 weeks pregnant. You know what I mean? There's no enlightenment from that. So I think it's important to just go in very open-minded and saying the most important thing is that I'm healthy, the baby's healthy, we're safe, and we're nourished, and we're going to come out of this with, you know, a happy, healthy, you know, mom and baby. Like that's the most important thing. And like, I mean, I guess we could talk a little bit about like the weight gain or like losing fitness a bit, because there, I mean, as an athlete, we do love that feeling of being fit, right? Like that's one of the perks of like, and reasons why we do endurance sports, is because it does feel great to be at this like fitness level. And you kind of, you're going to lose some fitness when you're pregnant. You are going to see your body change and gain weight, and that is okay. That's normal. It's what's supposed to happen. And you will come back from it, and you will honestly probably come back as a stronger athlete, just having gone through being a mom and all the challenges that come with that.
Totally.
And then my other last advice would be just be a very strong advocate for yourself with your doctor about your health and your prenatal care. I've been to a couple different healthcare establishments throughout my series of pregnancies, and I've had quite a few issues. So I think it's important to make sure that you are voicing your concerns and talking with your doctor and making sure that they're fully understanding what's going on with you as well. So that's my last piece of advice.
I echo that. You know, interestingly,
anything else you want to add, Mary?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that when I was pregnant with my second, I was still running consistently, pretty high volume. So my friends had talked me into doing a marathon, and I'm like, okay, why not? So here I was going to do this marathon 6.5 months pregnant. And I was very lucky to be doctoring through the Mayo Clinic where, you know, again, I had been researching, is it a good idea to run a marathon while you're pregnant? What can happen? What do I need? I actually emailed a physician there who was an obstetrics physician with a background in exercise physiology. Can you believe that? That is like unheard of. And she has done research. Now there is minimal research on this. And I mean, she gave me the green light. So to your point, Alex, you know, I was very grateful that my body was able to do that, because I did it and it was great. It was still one of my favorite races to this date. Not because I was fast, but because I truly slowed down and relished in the actual marathon itself. But I mean, for her to take the time to give me the green light and say it, so long as that you are listening to your body's cues, you're fueling well, which she had known that I was a registered dietitian. I thought it was pretty cool. So absolutely. I think that all of these recommendations that we're talking about do under, you know, the guidance of your medical care team, but it is possible to train throughout pregnancy, so long as that you are trying to balance out some of these nutrition things that we talked about. And I would really say, if you want to learn more, absolutely head over to our blog. It goes more in depth in managing some of the side effects throughout pregnancy, but also, I mean, obviously working with a registered sports dietitian would probably be the gold standard through getting you through the pregnancy as well.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you guys want to add? Or are you guys ready to chat a little bit postpartum?
Yeah, let's talk about postpartum, because that's literally all my mind is focused on, is getting to that point in my own personal life.
Okay. So tell me, you guys, Mary, I'll have you kick this off again. What recommendations do you have when it comes to navigating being a new mom and the desire to get back to training and exercising on a regular basis? And then also on top of that, kind of a side note, the pressure that you might feel to get back to your pre-pregnancy body.
This is hard. This is so hard. And to Alex's point before, like you have that identity, that just very strong identity as an athlete, that whether you want it to change or not, it's going to kind of flex throughout pregnancy. And now here you are postpartum. Nobody really can prepare you for that. You can read all the what to expect when you're expecting. You can read all the blogs out there on the internet, all the great guides to a healthy pregnancy and postpartum, and still not know like what the F you're doing, to be honest. Furthermore, you're in a chronic sleep deprived state, likely. You're maybe recovering from the physical trauma of childbirth. For some women, that's often a C-section, unfortunately, which can prolong that recovery process even further. And then also, with most women, I think the intention there is to provide breast milk, whether it's breastfeeding or breast pumping. So that's just an absolute whirlwind of a life change postpartum. So I tend to kind of have three different buckets for this. The one is making sure that you're fueling your body enough to supply adequate breast milk postpartum. The second is, perhaps you're trying to get back to training, and perhaps more so for the mental sanity reasons versus the actual physical benefit. But then the third bucket is your body composition goals. In general, you can't have all three. Because if you try and push your athletic goals too hard, there's a really good chance you're going to compromise breast milk production. If you try and focus on your body composition goals too much, there's a really good chance you're going to compromise breast milk production and also your endurance goals, because you may be teetering that fine line of the relative energy deficiency syndrome. So it's really hard. And I would say most often you're not going to be able to produce adequate breast milk. You're not going to be able to train as a high level athlete, and you're not going to be able to achieve body composition goals all at the same time. So it's going to take some prioritization on the woman's part, realistically.
Yeah.
Quick question. In the sense, sorry about that, Alex. Did you at once, either of you can answer this, did you feel like you maybe were a little bit more worried about those feelings of pressure to return and getting your body back before the baby was born, but then after the baby was born, your feelings kind of changed? Did you feel that or not?
Yeah. Especially with my first pregnancy, I was like, oh, I'm going to do all this training. We get my body back to being strong, and because I had done all these triathlons prior to having kids. And then as soon as that baby arrived, I was like, I don't care about any of that. I just want to love this child and be in the moment with this baby and enjoy my baby. And I will tell this to every new mom. I said, your number one priority is to enjoy your baby. So if what you're doing with breastfeeding is making you miserable, change it up, because the priority is to just enjoy your baby, because they truly they're only that little for so long. And it's a very taxing but wonderful time. So you just do what you have to do to be able to enjoy it. So for me, with my first breastfeeding didn't go super well. He was born early. I honestly I maybe spent 20 minutes with him the first 24 hours because I was so sick. And so we didn't really get a good start on breastfeeding. And I think because I had gone through all of that trauma of being sick, I didn't have a very strong letdown of milk when I did feed. And so he would get really frustrated, and he had already gotten used to the bottle and how quickly and easy it was to get milk through there. So then I actually didn't realize this going into being a new mom, but you can exclusively pump. And that was something, and I know, Mary, you did that as well, is where I just was pump around the clock, and I produced enough milk. I was a very like heavy like milk producer, and so I had no issues with pumping and producing enough. And actually I produced a lot like to go into the freezer for future use, and it worked out great. It's a lot of work to exclusively pump because you're constantly like washing your pumping supplies multiple times a day, but you kind of get into a groove. And honestly, I could sleep a little bit more because my husband could get up and feed the baby, and I could just wait until my next, pumping session. So, I mean, at that point, I was so focused on just enjoying motherhood that I did not care about my weight or my body. And I just said, I'll worry about that later. Like right now, I'm just going to enjoy this baby. And that's been the case with all of these pregnancies, where during the pregnancy, I'm like, oh, I'm like really looking forward to getting my body back. But once the baby's there, didn't even care. And I was like, I'll get there eventually.
I was listening to a podcast the other day with, it was Missy Franklin, who is an amazing Olympic swimmer. And she got pregnant, had her baby, and she had the same feeling. And then she was like, I hit that 3-month mark post having my baby. And I was like, this routine sucks. Like, it's like feed the baby, let the baby sleep, change the baby. And she was just like, I still love being a mom, but it was more of like the routine, the mundane. She was like, that's what got me first. She was like, I kind of started to focus on the fitness aspect, like getting that kind of like the mental benefits that you said first, Mary, is like the priority, right? And then it was more of like, from there, it kind of changed into like wanting to feel my best. And so fueling in a way that, maybe got her closer to her pre-pregnancy or whatever. But either way, I think it's like, I think the biggest takeaway that I took from that is like to keep expectations very limited, like either low or none. And I don't know if that's not like a negative way, but it seems to me that like keeping expectations on the lower end for what your return will be like, both either mentally, physically, what your goals end up being, seems like maybe it's like, don't be surprised if you're surprised type of deal.
Yeah. I think one of the surprising things for me postpartum, especially right away postpartum, was how difficult it was to navigate taking care of myself and a newborn, because like you just went through this like major physical trauma, and you have milk coming in, which can be, and like, it's just kind of like, you feel like a hot mess. And I think it's important for like, you to like, for new moms to just understand like, yeah, this is going to be pretty rough for a little while because you're taking care of yourself. But once you start to actually really physically recover from that childbirth, like it does get easier. So just like you get in the trenches and just know that you're there, and make sure you have a good support system. Like set expectations with if you have a spouse or like a parent or whoever, like have someone there to help take care of you as well, because it can be really overwhelming.
Okay, so guys, I came up with some questions that I thought would be really fun. I always love like round table or like quick fire questions. Yeah. There's a few podcasts that I listen to that does this at the end, and that's always my favorite. Okay, so I'm just going to go through. I've got 7 questions here. You don't have to make this like super long, but just kind of like tell me like the first thing off the top of your head. Do you care, either one of you, who goes first? Should we keep it the same each time?
Yeah. Well, Mary, you can go first and then I'll go second.
Okay. Tell me biggest pregnancy craving that you had.
Ooh. Cinnamon rolls.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Alex.
with my 2 boys, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were like always, like I would eat those all the time, and I have yet to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich this time. Like it just does not sound good to me, which is really weird. I've had more food aversions this time around than I've had pregnancy cravings. I'm trying to think if I've had any like cravings this time around. In the first trimester, the only thing that like made me feel really good was like carrots, like baby carrots and ranch dip, which was so random.
That is super random. I thought you were going to tell me like graham crackers or something. All right,
No.
Mary, tell me aversion.
Ooh, coffee, which was really sad. Like normally I'm a baseline 1 to 2 cups a day, but it was just even the smell of coffee brewing, it was too much. Couldn't handle it. Mm-mm.
How about you, Alex?
The first two boys, like the pregnancy I'm in right now is like really weird from my previous ones. But before, I think it was like, I don't know. With my other two boys, I had a really good appetite. This time around, just a lot of food. Like I just haven't had the greatest appetite. So, probably things that like just chicken breast or, um, yeah. But I have been eating a lot of smoked salmon this time around. Oh, and deli meat. I do crave deli meat with all three of my pregnancies. I think it's because I'm not supposed to have it, like unless you like microwave it because of the risk of listeria. And so I'm just like, why do I always want the things
That
I'm not supposed to
forbidden
have?
fruit.
Yeah, like there's like you should have sushi, and I'm like, oh my god, that's all I want is sushi. It's like the things I'm not supposed to
I
have.
really want a martini.
Yeah, well, yeah, the stressful days lately, I'm like, oh, I really could use a drink, or like really good like brie cheese. You're not supposed to have like the softer like unpasteurized cheeses, and I'm like, oh, really good brie cheese or blue cheese sounds so good.
Yeah.
Of course, but I
Okay.
think that's more of a like that you want the things more that you can't have kind of
Yeah.
situation.
Right. Okay, Mary, tell me a little bit, like your activity during pregnancy. Do you feel like from what I've heard, you were pretty active, but tell me a little bit more.
Yes, no, I just continued to train. I had been training before both pregnancies and I continued to run and train. So I was very lucky in that regard. Again, lower risk pregnancy, no issues. I would say, though, I did have increasing fatigue, particularly during my second pregnancy, because I already was working full time, caring for another child, and then pregnant, of course. So I did modify my routine during the second one, and I included more lower impact cross training during that one. But yeah, I consistently exercised until I had both of the girls, and it went great.
Yeah, I already shared mine. So Mary and I are very different, which I think this is good because Mary had like low risk pregnancies. I've had high risk. My first pregnancy was I had preeclampsia, terrible to the point where I had HELP syndrome, which if you don't know what that is, it's where your like blood cells start self-destructing and your liver starts shutting down. Like it's awful. It's really high risk and it was terrible. So I've always been kind of considered high risk with the rest of the pregnancies because of that first experience. So with my second child, things went really, really great. We will see what happens with this one. Like the goal always is healthy mom, healthy baby outcome. So hopefully that's the case this time around. But yeah, I keep activity pretty minimal just because high risk pregnancy. And at this point, I just want to get through it feeling good. And I do a lot of walking. Like walking is pretty much my go-to there.
So since both of you guys have had the baby, so outside of activity during, and I'm not talking about the necessarily right after birth, but how would you say that you view activity like now? Like for you, Mary, being your youngest, I think is 4, right? Like how is running now different from when it was prior to having children? And then Alex, tell me about you too.
You know, I feel like I am so much more pinched for time that I don't let running, when I think to when I competed in college and before having the kiddos, I would like stress out for hours about upcoming huge workouts. And now it's like, I don't even have time to like even think about what shoes I'm wearing for some of these harder workouts, much less stress for a couple hours. So I think obviously the time perspective, it's like when you have an hour, you just go for it and see how the workout's going to turn out. But the other thing is, I do feel like as a mom in general, it is so easy to lose a lot of yourself and your identity. And because you are giving up a lot of times your career, you're giving up, your own hobbies, your own interests. You're kind of tied to the schedule of your children. And I feel like post children, it's been one of the few pieces of my identity that I've been able to maintain. And I love it. I love it. And I think it has continued to carry me postpartum, and it will likely continue to carry me postpartum, whether I'm competing or not, just day in and day out. It just feels like my time, my unsolicited time. I don't have kids asking me to, make them 17 snacks, or I'm not packing backpacks or doing any of that stuff. It's just that uninterrupted, unsolicited time. I love it.
I'm laughing because I have I'm trying to count how many strollers are in my garage and how often I use them, because running has now become like my me time, or like even just going out for a walk or any workout where it's like you use that time as like time for yourself, time to like zone out or listen to something that you want to listen to and not, toddler tunes. And I honestly am a stronger athlete now. Well, not currently now, but like last summer when I was doing quite a bit of training, I was definitely a stronger athlete than I was prior to having kids, which I thought was really interesting. But I think when I went into selecting my races that I was going to train for, I went in with the intention of, if I'm going to sign up for this and do this, I'm going to really put in the effort and training. Whereas like before kids, it was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for this race because, I got nothing else to do with my time. Whereas now I have to be very intentional about what I do. So I did a sprint triathlon last summer, and hands down, way stronger than what I was prior to kids, which I thought was really interesting.
I love that. And I again, both experiences seem to like echo each other in like a slightly different way, but it seems like for you guys, it's like you're really prioritizing like the alone time, the mental health, whereas before it truly seemed like it was more of like a selfish endeavor of like how fit, like obviously can I get. Yeah, I love that. It seems like you guys both have such a healthy relationship with it now. Okay, last question I have. Is there anything that you guys would have done differently with your nutrition or activity during, right after, that kind of like stage? Like, so during the pregnancy and then in the few months following, is there any like key points, or do you think that upon reflection, you're like, you know what, I think I did the best that I could, I wouldn't change a thing?
That's an interesting question. And Alex and I were previously talking about this. So, right after I had my second, I started training and I felt really good. And there was about a 5-month window to qualify for the Olympic trials. And so I was registered for the Houston Marathon to qualify for the 2020 marathon trials. And it was the very last race, very last day that you would be able to do so. So it was about 5 months that I had. And I promised myself I would listen to my body. If things started to just not go well, I'd kind of scrap the entire plan. Well, I felt good. I felt good throughout training. I ended up qualifying. At the same time, I was working at the clinic and we were messing around with the DEXA scan machine, which many of our clients have DEXA body composition analysis done. So as you know, it shows body fat, it shows lean body mass and bone mineral density. And so I had it done and my bone density was very low. It was very low, like borderline osteoporosis, that low. So in all of this, I think in hindsight, I was not optimizing calcium and vitamin D intake. I was still taking a prenatal multivitamin postpartum, which is typically the recommendation for females, particularly endurance athletes, but most prenatal multivitamins do not have a good amount of calcium, and I just wasn't aware of it. Like I wasn't making it a priority. So I do think in hindsight, that is probably absolutely one of the things that I would change, would really make sure that I was optimizing dietary calcium and vitamin D The other challenge is it was winter, right? And at the time I was living in Minnesota. So it's not like
we don't see the sun very often.
But I do think that's important to note that if you are going into a really high training block postpartum, I don't think it would be out of the question to really have your calcium and vitamin D intake assessed, but also potentially look into some body composition testing that would assess bone mineral density. Because if you are breastfeeding or even breast pumping, calcium is one of the minerals that is leached out and into the baby's milk. So you want to make sure that you as a mom have strong bones long term.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, so there's definitely, I mean, it's interesting because I'm in pregnancy right now. And as I'm thinking about like this upcoming postpartum period, and I'm reflecting on my previous 2 pregnancies. So I realized that I probably put myself into a really low iron state with those previous pregnancies because I just, like knowledge is power. And so I didn't ask in those previous pregnancies to have my ferritin check, which is your iron store levels. And just recently, just a couple days ago, I was at my OB appointment and they were going to draw blood anyways. And I said, hey, can you check my ferritin levels? Because I said, I'm curious, AKA I was suspicious just based off of how tired I had been. And I figured it was going to be low, but I didn't think it was going to be 7. I mean, that is really low. And so
Alex, when you messaged us, when you messaged us the other day, I don't know if I've seen a ferritin that low. I think that might take the cake.
Yeah. I was like, oh shit, when I saw the lab come in, like, because my hemoglobin was still considered normal, which I knew it probably would be, but like ferritin is a whole other component that you have to ask to get it tested. And so at that point, my doctor was like, oh, your ferritin is low. We will check in 4 weeks. Like, let's up your iron supplement. Like, and I was like, I'm on it. Like, it is now my mission to get my iron levels back up. And then even postpartum as well, the blood loss that you have, with labor and delivery. And I'm like, I'm going to have to be on an iron supplement for the next like 2 years to try and get my ferritin up to where we typically like to see our athletes at, which is, I mean, for us, there's no like specific ferritin recommendation for endurance athletes, but we like, 30, 40, 50 range for our athletes. We tend to see really good performance. And I'm like, I got some work to do. And I didn't really focus on myself in that way with my previous pregnancies. And now I'm like, this is the last baby. Like, I really need to put myself in the best position to be the best mom, be the healthiest I can be, like maying forward. And so, yeah, definitely just relying a little bit more on some supplementation, because it's just, as a mom of 3 kids, it's going to be more challenging to get in all the nutrition that I need from food. Like, let's just be honest. So that is probably something that I look at very differently now with that. Good conversations. Good conversations, guys. Yes. Oh my gosh. All right. So as we wrap up this episode, I just want to say, make sure you click that subscribe button. Hopefully, to those that may be getting pregnant in the future or are pregnant right now or are postpartum right now, you took some really good nuggets from this discussion and definitely don't feel alone. If you have questions in the future, feel free to let us know. And we definitely have some awesome videos coming up in the future to discuss. So thank you again for listening, and we'll see you soon.